Okay. Well, good evening, Ashley. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Welcome to another episode of Her Journey. The H.E.R stands for healing, evolving, and redefining. So on today, we are going to be doing something a little different. Ashley's going to be one of our guests, and our co-host, Cassandra, is going to be facilitating this conversation. I'm Jackie Cameron. I'm also one of the hosts. And so I had this has been on my heart for a while to have a conversation. This isn't something that we talk about a lot, but it's something that I experienced on my journey of life. And we talk about just being transparent as we ask other women to be transparent, that we also will be transparent as well. So I wanted to talk about the wounds of an absent father, from two perspectives, from perspective of myself being an older woman, and then so from my generation and how that affects me. And I invited my daughter, Ashley, to come and talk about the topic as well from a younger generation's perspective. And when we talk about the wounds of an absent father, so I'm coming from more of physically and emotionally unavailable, where I would say Ashley is coming more from emotionally unavailable, but presently physically present. So just those two dynamics, and I thought it'd be interesting that a mom and daughter share this conversation, and they can have a similar experience, even though a different age group, to see how it showed up for myself and how it showed up for her. So that's what we're going to be diving into this afternoon. And we just hope that we say something that will encourage someone and just start you to thinking about this topic and start to think about your healing on this journey of healing that wound. And so, no one, so we decided that we would have this conversation. And of course, I asked my beautiful sister, would she facilitate us in this conversation? And she said yes. So we're gonna turn it over to her, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley, for being a guest on this. And so I'm excited about this because I think this affects more women than women like to speak about. And I like the two different perspectives. And I am just, when I started doing these questions, I had to run them by Jackie because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to overstep, but I want to kind of delve into it because it really does affect our lives in so many different ways. So I'm not going to prolong it. I wanted to start by asking Jackie, your father was absent when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Did you know who he was and did you know where he was as you were growing up?
I did know who he was,
Okay.
and I did know where he was, growing up as a
Okay.
child.
Was he
So,
close? Did he come visit? Did you have access to him?
no, my father was in the New Jersey area,
Okay.
and then later retired to North Carolina. So there were no visitations. There were moments where he would come to the South. He's originally from the South.
Okay.
And he would come to visit, and there were promises of him coming to see us, and my grandmother preparing us, to wait for his arrival, and he never showed up. And so as a kid, you don't understand that. You start to think like, well, is it something I'm doing, or is he coming?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I knew where he was, but he was not present physically or emotionally.
Okay. Okay. Wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
And Ashley, your father was present in your life growing up and still is?
Not currently, but yeah. So my parents were married, I want to say 25 years. Okay, I got it. 25 years. So he was present for the first 25 years of my life. And then we had a little bit of a relationship after that, but then it just kind of like faded out as time went on. So he was physically there, but I would say emotionally was very hurt. And I would honestly say maybe checked in more to his childhood trauma than
Wow.
being present for us as a father and the man in the household.
So when did you learn about that and how did you deal with that? Because if you're more dealing with, so he's acting out really from what he was hurt.
Yeah.
Saying?
Yeah. Yeah. It was always there. I think so. It's tough because sometimes I think about like where I was cognitively as a child and what I could understand and what I couldn't understand.
Yes.
So it was always there. Like I remember, we would ask for lunch money for school and he would say, "Oh, I had to walk to school. I had nothing." And he would always bring up like one story where his father, I feel personally like betrayed his trust.
Yes.
And it was always very specific details about this story. And I was like, this story has nothing to do with lunch money. Like, but I never thought about it when I was like in elementary school or middle school. But once I started to hit high school, I was like, this story keeps coming up. No matter what you're talking to me about, it keeps coming up. And so you're really stuck in it. And anytime he would often like mention something from his childhood that clearly was connected to a story that was like that really hurt him. But I would say it wasn't until my adulthood that I could like understand that. The child in me was just like, I get that was your past, but like you need to be here for me present now. Like this is how it's affecting me now. But now as an adult, I can be a little bit more understanding and compassionate about that piece. But he was, yeah.
Wow.
And I think for me, like I had a different experience because he was physically absent and emotionally absent. So I don't have the stories. So I don't know the backstory to what his childhood was like. So it showed up for me as abandonment and rejection on my part because, I don't have anything that I can give reference to.
Right.
So now it's just like, okay, now you've abandoned me, you reject me, like, am I not good enough? Or what is it about me that you can't, because my dad went on to have 4 sons in another, relationship. And he fathered those 4 sons, so I'm just like, my sister and I are the only 2 girls, so.
So
So I
what
don't
you saw
understand.
was he was there physically and from your perspective, also there emotionally for those times.
Yeah, so to me, I'm like, so you have the capability of doing it.
Yeah.
You chose not to. Now, whether, like, I would like to say, to preference this conversation, and we'll get into that further, I was able to make peace with my dad before his passing, because he has passed on. So we did have some conversation, but as a child growing up, like you don't understand it. It's just like, okay, you don't want to see me.
So how old were you when you were able to kind of just have a conversation and
Oh gee, in my 40s,
wow,
like 47. So it was a very long time, yeah. And then being introduced, I remember going to my dad's mom's funeral, which my grandmother, and my mom and one of my dad's sisters were still very close, so she called and said, my grandmother passed away, my mother took me and my sister to New Jersey, and I can remember distinctly being introduced to my father. I think I was 17 or 18. And my mom took us there, and so she was like, this is Gwen, this is Jackie. And in my mind, I thought, who gets introduced to their father? Like, why don't you know I'm Jackie?
right.
Why don't you know she's Gwen? It was so odd to be introduced to your dad, because he couldn't, have pointed this out. So she said, this is Gwen. And I was like, wow, that feels so weird. That doesn't feel right, being introduced to your dad. And then a few days, the next day, someone asked him, did he have daughters here visiting? And he said he had no daughters. So one day I get introduced to you, the next day you deny me. So his abandonment and rejection, and then it became a big issue between my aunts and family, so there's an argument, and so we were here for a funeral and it turned into something else. you know, and, you know, I later found out like why he denied us. Because of the relationship he was currently in, and that person's not want to deal with that or want him to have anything to do with us. So that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, that,
So,
okay, all right,
Yeah,
all right. And so we talked a little bit about marriage and you are divorced.
yes.
I am twice divorced.
After
And
got us, she's holding the M up.
hold it down, hold it down. And so in thinking about that and her being able to express how she felt her father was there
Yeah.
physically, but not emotionally.
Mhm.
So you were married for 25 years.
Mhm.
Did you did you ever think about your kids in that absent father thing? Like, did you stay in the marriage because longer than you may have if he had not been emotionally there?
Oh, that's a great question.
Mhm.
I just heard these questions 5 minutes, today when I got to her house, so I didn't know them to marinate on them. Let's make that clear. Okay, so ask me that again.
So do you think that you stayed in your marriage? Because we've talked about
Yep,
a little bit about them. That's a whole nother
Yeah.
too. But do you think you kind of stayed in your marriage a little bit longer because you did not want your children to have that absent father physically? So you kind of stayed in it.
oh, that's a great question. When I first said that question, I would say no. I felt like I stayed, but then as I'm clearing myself, said no. I think maybe a piece of that would be yes,
Okay.
but I feel like I also stayed because of my unhealed self. Like who I was, I didn't have my identity,
Mhm.
which is also something that can stem from the absence of a father. And you are looking for safety, protection, security. And so when you think that you have that, you think like, okay. And then your dad, you're looking for affirmation. Your father should be the first person that affirms you, right? So I think that I was just so broken and that wound was a gaping opening, right? Not just a scar. And I had not addressed it. So I chose out of my brokenness. Okay, and so I think my unhealed version stayed for many reasons. And so we will say, yes, maybe because, okay, this is a father figure. So yes, but also because I didn't know who I was. And so I was dealing from that abandonment, that rejection. So some of it was my choice because it's like, okay, I don't want to be abandoned again. I don't want to be ejected. So what I need to do just to make it right, which means lower my standards, right? Means apologize when I didn't do anything, just for peace sake. Because I'm just like, okay, if I'm peaceful, the house is peaceful. If I did something to upset him and I didn't apologize, the whole house paid for it.
Yeah.
So I'm just basically existing, trying to hold something that I deem as a marriage was really wasn't. Because, and then here you got two broken people, because he's broken from his past childhood.
Yes.
I'm broken from my past childhood, and now we're trying to parent children. The ultimate, who gets, I don't wanna say damaged, but who gets hurt or don't get enough of what they need is the children. Cause you got two people who are unhealed trying to to raise a family. So I would say, I would say yes to that question, but then I would also say those other factors were also layers to that question as well.
That's really layered. So Ashley, did you know that your mom grew up without a father, and knowing that, like, you saw the things in your dad or you heard it, did you recognize any of those traits in your mom growing up? Did like the abandoned
Um,
things? I think you said it when we interviewed you before about how you knew that your mom was holding things together, trying to keep the peace. But
Yeah.
did you also know that other part of it so much? So,
I think it became over time. I would say that the biggest part that I noticed more from my mother was the identity piece. The feeling of like not really feeling fully feeling sure of who she was, and what she was capable of. And that part was pretty heavy, like growing up. I remember like just like having conversations with her, like, why would you continue to stay in this, or why would you, try to make this work, like nobody's happy. And just feeling like her silence,
Yeah.
it wasn't like her silence made me feel like she didn't know who she was and the power that she had to leave or to even just not tolerate any of it.
right.
So it was the silence met with my questioning. There was just no answer. It wasn't like you're right, but I'm not listening to you, or get out of here, stay in a child's place. It was nothingness. And that made me feel like that's what I mean when I say like the identity piece, like not knowing who she was. It was like an unawareness piece that I would say was still present.
Did you think that you carried some of that?
I think in seeing my mom in that way, I actually kind of went the opposite.
Okay.
In a very strong way.
Yes.
To the point where now, like in my adulthood and even in my marriage, I am trying to dial it back to the middle. So I am a very strong personality. I think growing up in my household, I became a very strong identity. Nobody was going to cross me. Nobody was going to challenge me in any way. I was going to challenge you before you challenged me. Because I just saw what I'm gonna use her words. It wasn't my words as a child, but what trying to keep the peace created.
Yes.
And I was just like, well, then I'm fine with stepping into the chaos and the fire. Like that was kind of my energy. So I feel like now to the point where I remember like growing up there, after a while, it got to the point where like I would like challenge my father back, like, no, you're not gonna, like my father, I remember would get very loud. He was very big and he was very loud, especially when you like defied him or you did something that he didn't want you to do. He would just get really loud and my mother would get silent. And I just said, I will never do that. And I did it. I did it. And I feel like how that's impacted me today is I've had to dial that back. My husband is a very more mild-mannered, non-confrontational type of person. So sometimes he'll like, it'll be something simple like, oh, I just want to take you out to eat. And I'm like, no, I'm going to pay. Like in the past, I'm like, no, I'm paying for my meal because I don't want you to think you could get one over me. And he's like, well, I just wanted to pay for the meal. Like it's not that big of a deal. And so now as I'm growing up and even in my marriage, I've had to learn how to like dial that strength down. Like it's not even strength. It's just like, I just don't want you to ever see me weak. That's really what it was. I didn't want you to ever think I was. And so now I'm going the opposite way and I'm coming to the middle.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I think some of that silence came too from the way I grew up, where my grandmother was like, you seen, you hurt, you're not hurt. Like you're not getting, when they talk, grown folks talking, you got to go to the kitchen. Like you don't get to express your thoughts and whatever. So when somebody shows that sense of control or that loudness, it was like I describe myself as a turtle. Like I'm gonna stick my head out, but if it's too, then I'm gonna go. It's like even though it shows silence, it's a sense of safety for me because I'm not a confrontational person, and like we weren't we didn't grow up just being able to express ourselves.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So you could think it, but you didn't always say it.
Yeah.
And so because of his strong personality and because of the loudness that intimidated, I'm gonna say me or the house,
Mhm.
I was like, the best thing is you don't put fire on, you don't put lighter fluid on fire. You throw water.
Mhm.
So it was a way of me, for my inner peace and trying to bring peace into the house, because eventually the fire will die down if somebody,
Mhm.
and so, some people may see that as weakness, but for me, I saw it as a strength for my mental
Yeah.
safety. It
Mhm.
was the way I protected myself mentally, because that's what I need to do. So.
And I would say the opposite for me. I think too that sometimes people see that strength that like, nope, I'm that strong as, I wouldn't even say assertive because it was aggressive.
Yeah.
I was aggressive. Like my nature is very aggressive. And I don't think that was right either. Cause like that has caused me a lot of harm in my relationships growing up that I had to undo. Like, and it's not, and that took time for me too. So I would say like my way wasn't the right way either. It was on the extreme end of the other side.
Yeah.
Wow. So you discussed, I like that analogy about the turtle. I really do.
Yeah.
I think that is really perfect for this. So you two discussed like you having your father there, but not being there emotionally, and you not having him there at all. The similarities and how the two of you, I see how the two of you have worked together and built each other up. And this flower was able to bloom out of both of those two dynamics and almost being on two different spectrums, but they're able to come together. And I think for me, have seen this blossom because the two of you, I mean, that mother-daughter relationship has really just blossomed from this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. Because I feel like because we have such an open relationship, I can remember Ashley telling me one time she was just like, she got to the point was like, when I started complaining, she was like, I don't even want to, she wasn't disrespectful and said this, but I know she was, I don't even want to hear it. So she didn't say that. She said, you know what? You're not tired. She said something like, you might be sick, but you're tired. She said, because when you get sick and tired, you're gonna do something. In other words, she was like saying to me, like, I don't want to hear this no more, because you've been saying this for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I want to be this, she's like, but you're not tired of it. Because when you get sick and tired, you're gonna do something. And I was just like, ooh, I got like, I'm not telling her nothing no more.
Yeah.
But it that hit me and I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that absent thought, like it shows up in relationship.
Absolutely.
And I love to use this other analogy, relationship, but I will use definitely in relationship with males. It showed up, I started to do this thing, like I'm attracting the same type of spirit. And I'm like, why am I attracting this? Why am I attracted to that spirit of like my husband, like that aggressive, like, it always thought, and I'm like, why am I attracting the same type of person or
I think because they brought that protectiveness in them.
Well, it appears that, but then when I started to really study, start to really think about it, and then I started thinking, it's like, it's something in myself that I need to correct as well, because I'm attracting that same type of spirit. And so I did, just on this journey of my own healing, like, how am I showing up? And I discovered that I was showing up as a blank canvas. Because I wanted you to choose me. So I didn't want to rock the boat. So I'm gonna conform more easily to your ways. I'm not gonna do anything to upset you. I may not like something, but I'm not gonna be the first one to say it. I'm gonna lower my standards. Here I go again, trying to keep the peace, right? And so I took this whole year off. I'm like, I'm not dating, I'm not doing, and I really wanted to study. And then I discovered like, no, I need to show up fully painted. That's my identity. That's who I am. I need to show up with boundaries, because my boundaries were little light, and they can become a little flexible if you pull my arm hard enough. So I need to show up, and so now that canvas looks fully painted, and I know if you walk away from me, it's not a reflection of who I am. It's a reflection that you're just not a fit for me.
Yeah.
So now I'm not blaming myself like, okay, I'm being abandoned and rejected again because I did something that you didn't like. No, it's not. You know what I mean? Now I'm looking for somebody to be found.
Yeah.
I want to be chosen. I want to, because when I'm found, there's already the existence of who I am. It's just like if I tell you, you find your earring, like you're in the house, oh my God, I found my earring. You're excited because it already existed. It has to, so now I have an existence of my identity, who I am. So now when you find me, I'm being me. I'm not trying to go. And if me being me is not good enough, then I'm okay with that. But that still stems back to father who abandoned and rejects it, and that's the first person that should be affirming and helping you with that identity. And so now you have to go on this journey of healing it and finding it yourself. You know what I mean? And so I discovered that, and now I'm like, I'm willing to negotiate the paint on the canvas. So if it's red and we need it to be orange, you can throw a little yellow in there, and that means conversation.
Yes.
That means, let's compromise.
Yes.
So now I'm just not so quick to be like, okay, you need me to move to East
color
Cupcake? Okay, give me a year, I'm coming to East Cupcake. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like but it took me, like, I'll be 62 on Saturday, August 3rd. It took me a long time to get to that. And so that's why I think we need to have this conversation, because I don't want other women to have to wait till they get to their late 50s and their 60s to have this conversation. And it's very hard. Like, I initiated finding my dad when we reunited. And so I saw him on my aunt's Facebook page, and I sent him a private message. And he didn't respond at first. It took some months. And he finally responded, and through all of that, called me, and we had a conversation. And I was able to have that conversation with my father because I had already done the work. So I felt like I was able to forgive him. And have, he gave me some explanations to some questions. Some of them weren't as satisfying as I wanted them to be, but he gave me some. And so, and then from that, every 2 to 3 weeks, he would call me. And so I learned that, like, I said, okay, here's the thing, I never called him. And people be like, why did you call your father? Because I needed to protect the little girl who felt abandoned and rejection. So when you call me, I know you want to talk. If I call you and you stop answering your phone, you miss a call, then you're gonna trigger my little girl. So now as a grown woman, here's the power. I get to choose how I am in relationship with you. You no longer have that power because you misused it. Yes. But now as an adult, I show up and I was like, okay, so I wait for his call, we laugh and talk, okay, next time, never called him. And that kept me safe, that kept me, my mental, okay, I can deal with this that way, so. It's a big thing, and it plays out in different relationships differently.
Well, that was my next question about the forgiveness part.
Yes.
Did you forgive him?
Yes, I did. And even when we went to his funeral, first we were contemplating where we going, we decided to go. And sitting there listening to everyone talk about this awesome father, this awesome grandfather, all the stuff they were saying. And I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, because I'm like, I don't know this person. But he sounded like he was a wonderful father. He sounded like, why couldn't we have experienced that? But we didn't experience it. Yeah. So it was just like, wow, this is crazy.
That's very different.
Yeah.
It's really different.
Yeah, but we made peace at the end. Like, I felt at peace at the end. So, and I was able to forgive.
That's a big one right there. being able to be at his funeral and having that experience of like, who was this person?
Mm-hmm,
That's a really big one.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I honestly, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
big one.
yeah,
And thank God that you were able to do that,
yeah,
in spite of it all.
yeah.
Because that's a hard one. That's a
Mhm.
hard one for women.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you,
But-
Ashley? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Let her
I was
answer.
gonna ask her.
In terms of how it shows up in relationships,
Yeah,
me,
are you able to
um,
forgive? I mean, did you say you all have a relationship right now and how?
we don't have a relationship right now. I was trying to think about, as you were describing, like being a canvas and all of that, I was trying to think of like what my experience with my father, like if I could visualize or like describe it to somebody, what it would look like. And I think for me growing up, I felt more like the domino pieces that you put just together. And it was like this beautiful thing. But if somebody hits it, it all falls apart. That's probably the more accurate description of who I was. Both I would say in childhood, in adolescence, probably up to adulthood. I looked like a well together, put together pieces. Everything was where it was supposed to be. Don't mess up the image. Everything was where it was supposed to be and how it's supposed to be. But really, if you poked it, it all kind of came apart. And then the just emotional meltdown that would come from how much time it took me to put myself back together.
Yeah.
I think that's how it showed up for me. And I can think of like various scenarios of like childhood. I was known for having these meltdowns, and they would call it like a short fuse box, like, oh, Ashley's fuse box shorted. And I would just completely fall apart, break apart. But it was because I think I was going through all of this stuff at home. I was seeing all of these things happening at home. I was hearing all these things happening at home. But to the outside world, it looks great. My parents are married. They're, they, everything looks okay. I should be grateful. And even I remember certain family members' houses that we would go to. My father was like, "This is my baby girl," only for us to get into the car, and he would never speak to me because he was mad at me about something that happened before. So it was just a lot of like inconsistency and unpredictability, and me trying to hold it together and then it just falling apart. I remember, and I think that is it still is the most painful part of my relationship with my father, and it's part of the reason why I choose not to have a relationship with him.
Okay.
We haven't. There were attempts, I would say, to like for me to try to express what the pain of my childhood was like growing up in that household where there was like instability in emotions and unpredictability about how he felt. And you walk in one day and it'd be like, "Hey, Ashley home," and the next day it's like he never even knew you existed. And I tried to voice that to him, like, and it's been met with loudness. You don't know what you're talking about. Why would you even think I never did that to you? Da, 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 da. It's met with loudness. It was also met, I'm gonna be honest, it was also met with phone calls from other family members telling me, why don't I appreciate my dad? In the Bible, you should honor thy mother and father. How dare you try to talk to your father? You don't talk to an adult that way. My feelings weren't validated as a kid. And so what would happen is I would have these meltdowns because it was like, my feelings don't matter, but I'm building up all this anger and rage. I remember constantly saying, like, I feel like a bulldog on a leash. Like, and the one day I just get let loose, it was like, oh, but it was building up for so long. And I was being told constantly as a child, you're not supposed to feel that. Or you're not supposed to feel that. You're not supposed to speak about that. That stays in the house. You're not supposed to talk about it. And I think what happened was that created in me, when I started to develop relationships outside of my household, I came like that domino, very well put together. Don't rock the boat. Please don't rock the boat. Because I
ask about it.
together. Yeah, and it got to the point where like I almost had too much of an opinion, and it was like, do you need to constantly have something to say about everything? You know, like, does everything have to end up in this, like, you proving to me that you're strong? And I remember one time when my husband and I were dating, we were actually in adolescence, so it was very insightful for him to even say this, but he was like, Ashley, I get that you're strong, but can you be more than that? Look, can we move beyond that? Like, because you've already proven to me that you're this strong Black woman, you don't need, but what about your wants? What do you desire? Like, I felt like it took me into an adult to be able to realize that there's power in saying, I want you here.
Yes.
Like, do I need it? Maybe not, but I want, and wants are honestly stronger than needs. Because if I need a car, I don't care what kind of car it is, just let me get from point A to point B. But when I want you here, or when I want a Porsche, I'm going to do everything to get it, and I'm going to work for it and work for it and work for it to keep it. And so now as an adult, I feel like I'm at a point where I can have relationships because I want these people here. I was also thinking about just like how it shows up and how it showed up in my relationship. That was in a big way, but even just in little ways. Children, this is very scary for parents, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. I know it's not this podcast, but the way adults speak to children becomes the voice that they use to speak to themselves as adults, right? So if you're constantly talking to a child and saying, put that down, why would you do that? This is eventually the voice that they internalize and they use to go through life. And I remember my father, this kind of like a funny thing, but whenever my father would lose something in the house, everybody had to wake up and find it. It didn't matter if it was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night, we had school the next morning, everybody had to get up. He's yelling, that's it, get up, everybody find it. And so fast forward to now with my husband, if he's looking for something and I'm like, oh, it's right there. And he'd be like, where? And I know he didn't look. I can hear my father's voice being like, what do you mean you didn't look? You didn't look. You want me to get up? Why would I gotta get? I can hear it. And in the past, I used to verbalize that to him. And he'd be like, whoa, why are you attacking me because I asked for this one thing where it was? But now I've had to do the work to like be able, I still hear that voice, but to not attack him with that. Because he didn't grow up like that. That's not his fault that I grew up like that. That's not his responsibility to change that. It's my responsibility. So like I often think about that's like a little silly way that it's still my father's voice still shows up, that trauma still shows up and impacts me in my relationship, but I've had to work to not, so that he doesn't have to feel the brunt of that, because that's not fair to him.
Wow, that's
powerful.
very, very powerful.
Very powerful.
So how did you handle it, seeing that he wasn't emotionally there? I know that you said you got quiet.
How do I handle it with what, my children, or do
Your
I
children. And then we're gonna skip on to encouraging women, because this is affecting me, because I can see both of these in my growing up. Both sides of this.
So are you saying, how did I feel his void of not being there emotionally?
Yes. Did you find yourself overcompensating?
I think, and here's interesting, I feel like, yes, but differently for each of my children.
Yeah, because they're good.
Because of their individual needs. I feel like, if I'm transparent and honest, that I overcompensated more for Jason than I did for Ashley. And then Nick having autism, like, he didn't even really get what was going on. And when I say that, I mean like, cause Ashley had that little fire about her. So for example, if my ex couldn't find a tool, he would send Jason down to the basement. Jason, go find a wrench now Jason don't even know what that is. Jason would be down there for 10, 15, and he would always, well, what's taking us so long? You better not come up here until you find it. I would find myself trying to sneak down to the basement, give him the wrench, be like, well, go upstairs and take that to your father. Because I knew Jason didn't even know, you haven't even talked to him. Now, if Ashley was asked to go get him one, she gonna say, go get yourself. Like so he didn't even ask her certain things. So I felt like Jason, I can remember examples of Jason trying to cut the yard and he would just be watching them and then critiquing to me, look at him, look how he's cutting it. He's not teaching him, go out there and teach him tell him to do this and that, but he's not doing it. So I felt like I overcompensated because I felt bad for Jay, like, here's your boy, you should be taking him under your wing, taking them fishing it. So I felt like I overcompensated emotionally, just because I felt like he was a little softer in that area. And I felt like, oh, Ashley got this. There were times when I would step in for her, like when she was going off to college. And me and her had to move all the stuff up there to ourselves because he just didn't go. So we moved refrigerator, like, stuff like that. So I think it was different for my son than my daughter. Ashley and I always were able to have talk, Jason's more like, boys are one word answer. Where you going? Out. When you come back? What time you coming back? Soon. Whereas like with Ashley, we always had a conversation. Right. And she was able to express to me like what she thought too, where Jason kind of internalized that. Yeah. So I would say I felt like I did, try to fill that void, but our house was busy. But then there's Nicholas, and then now he has special needs, and with his autism, and so then I feel like I fell off from being emotionally sometimes even available for Ashley and Jason because now I'm focusing all of the attention on Nicholas, which they never complained about. They were great. They helped watch them. They their high school years. They would take turns watching and being very supportive about that. So yeah, there was definitely some trying to fill that void, trying to make them feel whole, because it's almost like a one-man show. And so, which became very draining and overwhelming for me too, because I'm trying to make sure everybody's okay. But then I all felt like, could somebody throw me a life jacket? Like I feel like I'm sinking, but I gotta stay afloat. Because if I don't stay afloat, then this ship's really gonna sink. Because I'm the glue that's holding whatever this is, holding it together. But my glue's coming apart. Well, who do I go tell that to? So yeah, it was definitely some overcompensating happening for sure. Yes.
So what would you say to women now?
I would say to women who feel like they have that wound, that first of all, you must do your work, right? And so what does work look like?
I was gonna say, so what do you mean by the work?
So what does work look like? You have to, I would even say therapy. Like I've gone to therapy. I mean, love to say therapy and Jesus.
Amen. Amen.
But the combination of doing that work to really discover, be the parent to yourself that you wanted. Wow. Learn how to parent yourself. Be the parent to yourself that you desire, so that when you have offspring, you can parent from that place.
That's powerful.
And not parent from the way you were parent. If you are able to have conversation with either your dad or your mom. Yeah. Some people aren't willing to, they don't want to hear it. So, but I also encourage people to journal. To write a letter to the absent parent or whatever, and just read it out loud to yourself. If you can mail it to them, fine. If you can't, I also have encouraged people to go to, if their parents have passed, to go to their gravesite. Read that letter out loud. Burn it. and walk away. You're gonna feel such a release in your body to get that out. Have trusted friends that you can talk to, because here, I'm an example that the wound can become a scar. And when I say that, because you think, oh, it's wound, no, it's not gonna be there. No,
It's gonna be a scar.
you're gonna have some reminders, some memories of it, like I was talking about that voice that's still here that I gotta suppress. So, but you don't want it to be an open wound, because if you're bleeding, you're gonna bleed on somebody else. So you gotta get control of that. So seek out someone that can help you with that, know that you're worthy. And know that maybe there was something lacking in that parent. Like Ashley said, maybe they were parent from a hurt place. And so they're playing, and so forgiveness plays into it too. But you've got to have the desire to be around sound people. Like, find out affirm yourself. You know what I'm saying? Have affirmations. We talk about identity, begin to know who you are, know you are worthy of all things good. And show up fully painted. Don't allow other people to paint your canvas. Show up fully painted. And so those are just some of the things I would say to start the journey of healing. Yes. Ashley.
Yes.
Well, this is why you're Dr. Phyllis, because you said pretty much a lot of the things that I would say in the family, because you said a lot. I would echo a lot of those things. Really doing your work to learn your story, however that is, whether it's journaling, whether, sometimes people do like voice dictations, through therapy, talking about your story, really trying to figure out, and I think go deep, like allow yourself the space to truly go deep into that. It's bigger than just like, what did your father, make you feel? Like, think about, like, try to go a little bit broader than that, like bringing up stories, trying to rethink about how these things happen. I often think about like my childhood, and now the way I think about it as an adult is very different from the way I thought about it as a child, because I didn't have all the cognitive abilities. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to see others' perspectives and things like that. So I think it's very important. I always say, like, once you hit 21 and up, you really need to go back and check what you have been given, really decide what you want to keep with you and what you want to get rid of. It is time for you to start to reparent yourself. Your parents have brought you this far, whether it's good, bad, messy, that you got here. So there's some complexity to that experience in your childhood, but you ultimately get to decide how it goes forward. So in thinking about my father, I not only think about what my experience was like, what it made me feel, I try to go bigger and think about what was his life story and how that got him to the moment where he caused the trauma for me. But then I also think about, at the end, I'm always like, and what does that tell me? Like, what do I want to go forward with? Like, what have I learned? What does that mean about relationships? And I think that that's why I said a few times, but why I choose not to reach out to my father. And it's not because of the trauma and all of that. I feel like I've forgiven all of that. It's just, for me, based on that experience, I have learned I do not do well when people are inconsistent. So if people like love me one minute and hate me the next, I just don't do well with that relationship in general. And so that's why the luxury of adulthood is I get to choose my relationships. That's why I choose not to have those relationships. It's really that simple. It's not complicated, or, it's not that much. And then I also think I come from a different perspective, because I've never got a chance to really have that conversation with my father. I know we often say, like, speak to the parent, but the parent may not be ready to hear it. And that doesn't mean that should slow your healing down or your process down too. Like, do your work, do the journaling, read it out loud to yourself, like my mother was saying, or share it with somebody else. Find someone you can talk to about this experience. My last thing I would also say too is, like, just know this is a ever changing, evolving process. You don't go from experiencing trauma to not having any trauma. You know, I'm healed. I don't have any daddy wounds ever. I still have things that come up that I'm like, oh man, you know what? When I think about that, it's because of this happening in my life. Like I've given myself grace to know that I'm not complete in my healing, and I probably won't ever be. And however, I try to constantly remain aware of how I'm interacting with others and how others are interacting with me. I just question, like, why'd you make that choice, Ashley? Like, why'd you say it that way? Why'd you think about it that way? Because I feel like as long as you have an awareness, there's an ability to change, right? There's still things like, I'll give you another funny story, how it shows up. Like one of the biggest things that I remember about my childhood is like a lot of my parents' arguments would start with the mail. Because something would come in the mail. I'm going to talk about it from a child perspective, but something would come in the mail. My mom would say, can you grab the mail? Because I don't want your dad to see it. And then if I didn't get it in time because I was out playing with friends and he got it, chaos would ensue, right? So I now know what that stuff is, but like, and I remember now, fast forward to adulthood, I walk by the mailbox and I do not take any mail out. That mail could be piled up every day.
Oh, wow.
And my husband said to me, one day he came to me and was like, do you see the mailbox when you walk by to open the door every day to come in? And I was like, yeah, I see it. He was like, you never grab the mail. And even when I grab the mail, and bring it inside and say, here, this is your mail, you never open it. Why is that? Like, you know, and I'm grateful that he approached me with that as a question and not a judgment. And so I was able to express to him like, oh, growing up in my childhood, like now that I think about this, because you brought it to me, yes, mail was a big piece of like contention in my childhood. And so I have an issue with opening it. He's like, oh, okay, it's fine. But like, can we make a goal to open the mail once a month? Like, can we like, what can we do with this mail? Because I can't open your mail. It's a federal crime. Like, I can't do that. And I'm like, oh, all right, yep, leave it here. I'll open it. So like, it's still showing up today, but it's being aware, being open, really challenging and questioning yourself. That's like super important. And I just want women to know, like, it's a journey. It's a journey. Like, it's a journey. And, you know, and even if you do make mistakes, just apologize. Like, oh, you know what? I really thought about this. And it doesn't matter how late the apology is. Just apologize. You know what? I really thought about that time way back when we had that conversation. This happened in my childhood. I feel like that's connected to this. You know, I just want to apologize. It's never too late to apologize. So the more you learn, the more you grow, the more you can be apologetic. Redefining strong to mean that strong is also vulnerable. So it's okay too.
I like what you just said, because it makes me think about you can change, you still have the effects of it as an adult, you know, and you don't have to feel guilty because you still do, because it will always be a scar.
Another one. And I think but you are now.
I didn't, honestly, like all of a sudden it'll come up and I'll be like crying, like, why? What is going on? Because it's still there. And it will be there. But it's okay to express it, get it out, and then move on.
So that just means you're self-aware. You know, you become self-aware, but that's why I talked about closing up the wound. But you may still have a scar. Those are those memories, those voices but now you know where it's coming from. So you cannot walk yourself through it or call somebody and be like, girl, I'm having this feeling today, or whatever, and have them, like, you know, recenter you or recenter yourself. So we don't need to escape.
The other thing I would say too,
we don't escape from our emotion. We just think like, oh my God, because, you know, I said I'm healed from this, but I have a thought. No, healing is a continual process.
That right there.
It is not a period. It is a comma. It is a destiny. So yes, you will have thoughts of it, but that's why you have to, have ground yourself, done your work, and then like, okay, like, we're having this moment, like I said, like, and I love the other thing I wanted to point out to Ashley, what Ashley said, to women. So, when we talk about the forgiveness and, people think like, okay, well, you don't have a relationship with your father, you forgive it, but that's not true. The end of that story can turn out differently
Yes.
for each person.
Right.
So, like I always say, I can forgive you, but I don't have to share address.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean that I haven't forgiven you. So people think like, oh, well, people have this idea of forgiveness, like, okay, well, you should be in a relationship with him. No, I forgive the act, I forgive the behavior, but I do not have to have you in my space.
Right.
Mhm.
Because that's not gonna be good for my mental health.
Exactly.
And so therefore, for my mental health to be good, this is the road of forgiveness I've chosen. And it's okay. So, you could be in a relationship, but I might not be in a relationship, but it's both forgiveness.
Right, because
Yeah.
the other person may not be in that relationship.
Exactly, yeah. What were you
Yeah.
gonna say,
I
Ashley?
think two things. One is emotions are great consultants, but terrible CEOs. Do not let them govern everything. They're indicators. They're supposed to tell you something's up, something's wrong. Let them be consultants and not CEOs. Let them not govern all your actions.
That's the queen of
I
a
think
woman.
I think the other thing I would say too is that there's beauty in the scars, right? Because I had this experience, I can see it on women, on people, not even women, not even just women, adolescents too, and children. And I can speak to it in a way that other people cannot. And I've seen that happen in my life. In the past, I was a psychologist at a high school, and I could remember like seeing it, and I could remember speaking to it in a way that another person could not, for a couple of kids. And we built relationships from there. They knew that they can come to me and talk to me about it. I could see the struggle. I could see the like, yeah, you don't have a voice, you're silent because you're the adolescent, but all this pain is happening. And I thank God for that, right? And I think that's why I love God for that, because I'm like, you really used every part of my story. Like you were using every part. So like now when I do endure pain, I just know that it's setting me up for in a few years or a few months, whenever I'm going to meet someone who's going through that thing, and I'm going to be able to speak to it in a way that nobody else can, to help them know that there's still life after that. Like you still get to have life after that. So like there's beauty in that scar. I never want that scar to go away, because it has allowed me to heal or to help so many people in a way that I can see that other people can't help them.
Yes.
So I'm just grateful for that too.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
That's yeah.
That's awesome.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, that's like turning our pain into purpose. You know what I mean? And so on the other side of that test, I always like to say it's a testimony. And so we're here to help each other. And so now you can, like you said, you can speak from that place where people can hear you, because they're like, you know exactly what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And so we have to embrace this, but I will re-emphasize, you've got to do the work to change the wound into a scar. Like we can't just have it and gaping and we're bleeding, because we're gonna continue to bleed and bleed and bleed. We gotta get control of the bleeding.
And we
And do
ourselves
the
will
work.
pour salt on that wound sometimes.
Oh
We've
yeah,
got to
self-inflict.
we've got to learn not to pour salt on the wound. That's just not good.
Mhm.
And if you're not working to do it and you're just wallowing in it, that's what you're doing. You're just pouring salt on your wound, and you need to come out of that.
Yeah.
There's so much more places, there's so much more for you to learn and grow, and your life can be so many other things. Like you said, there's beauty in the scars. Let it heal. To see the beauty of it. And so many women, and I just love this. And I have to say, out of everything, that it's okay to go back and understand that something happened. And but it's not the end of it, you know?
The other thing I was thinking, I don't know why this just came to me, but sometimes we don't have the words.
Yeah.
Like we don't know how to verbalize and communicate our experience or articulate it. It's a lot, right? Because you unpack in pain and then you have to bring it to mouth and then you have to speak it. So I would also say to other people who may be struggling, like words, verbalizing is not your only form of communication, right? Like if you feel like you're an artistic person, draw it out, or like take a canvas and just slap some paint until you're not angry anymore. Or you know, musically, whether you like to create music or whether you like to listen to music, can you find a song that really encapsulate the emotion and the feeling that you feel when you think about your father relationship? Like use these bridges and connections, stories, other stories that you've heard, other novels that you've read. Use these stories to kind of help you to get to a place where you can verbalize it if you feel like you can't. And you don't need to know the whole story altogether. Again, it's a journey. So just also using other tools to communicate.
Yes, exactly.
And the person doesn't have to, I always think of, when my dear goes to jail, the young lady in the jail talks about, well, you don't know what he did to me. But they may not be at the place that you are. You can heal. They can stay where they are and you don't have to allow them back in your life like you were saying. But you need to heal. You can make the progress for yourself. And holding on to it is not it.
Right, because then bitterness comes
Yes.
in, right? So,
Yeah.
and I always say, what you hate, you will become.
Yes.
So the healing is for you, the forgiveness is for
It's for
you
you.
to release yourself because that thing still has power over you. So it's not necessarily for the other person. It's for you, like you are to live life full. And so now you're living it half full because the other half, you are just so consumed with the wrong that was done to you instead of healing you. And just, the best thing you can do for somebody is heal.
What she said, I
Because-
couldn't verbalize it.
Well, the best thing you can do is somebody for heal because you will make different decisions from your heal version versus your unhealed. Sometimes when you are healed, you won't even make the choices you made when you were unhealed. Like you'd be like, did I like that? Like, because you know what I mean? So the key is healing, and healing is a journey. It is not, like I said, it's a comma, it's not a period. So just like I'm just saying, getting that wound to the scar, because that reminds you, look at where I came from.
Yes.
Like childhood, I can look at my hand and see some childhood wounds when I cut myself, and then I remember I cut myself with the glass, or I stepped on it, and so you can look back and look at the process. I'm in the process of moving, so I've been cleaning, and I found this journal, and I stopped for a while, started reading, and I was like, look at where I came from. Like, it was back to 2006, 2007, 2009, 2010. And I was like, God, you are amazing. Because that 2006, that 2007, like, I like to laugh. I'm like, I should be at a funny farm talking to myself. But the resilient to, you might try to snuff out the fire, but the pilot light is still on. So I am going to make it, having that positive thought process of like, I'm gonna get past, this is a storm, but this too shall pass. So the healing is the key here. Getting with other women that are positive, all of the things that, Ashley said, and, we all said here. So this is just a little, it's a big conversation. That needs to be talked about. And, we want to be transparent here, and we want to talk about things that aren't often talked about. But I thought this was such a great topic, and to have my daughter present to be like, wow, we both experienced aspects of the absent father, her more physically, but emotionally, mine's physically and emotionally unavailable, and how that showed up for each of us in our lives. And I'm like, wow, it's like, so we've got to, you know, kind of like break this generational thing. Now she has a beautiful baby girl
Yeah.
who has the dad, and now, you know, he's showing up, he's there physically and emotionally.
Mhm.
That's gonna be a well-rounded little fireball. She already is a
To say the
fireball.
least.
And so it's good. When do we stop? But here's the thing though, I wanna say, if I had, oh, what's the word I wanna say? We have to be careful as women, because if I had, continued to, you know, we have the bitterness for Ashley's dad. And
Mhm.
like Ashley, you know, and then she, oh, talking about I hate him and da, da, da,
Mhm.
you know, and then that, you know, that rolls down to her.
Yes.
And then she teaches her daughter, don't hate men, hate me. Like, you gotta do your own
Mhm.
healing. And another thing I would say to moms, don't,
Pass your stuff on.
don't pass that on to your children. Like, don't, it's because I also wanted to make clear, we're not talking about fathers here that, are absent because the caregiver,
Mhm.
whether that's mom, legal guardian, is so angry with dad that they are blocking the relationship with the child
Right.
because of their own anger. Like, even if you and dad aren't getting along, allow that father to be a father to his children. Don't
Right.
block that unless it's harmful or he's doing something. But there is sometimes where dads are absent and it's not their fault. So I wanna make sure we say that too. It's
Mhm.
because somebody's blocking that relationship
Right.
because of their hurt with them.
Mhm.
And that's unfair to the
The
child.
child. Mhm.
Mhm.
Don't pass your stuff down to
Right.
your kids, like, you deal with your stuff and teach them. And I often say that, I've said this to Ashley before, and I was like, you know, one of the things, as a mom, that I said to her before, is that, you know, she talked about, you know, being that more on that aggressive side and, you know, kind of having to dial back a little bit from my beautiful son-in-law, my handsome son-in-law. And I'm like, I said, you know what? I said, you know what I forgot to teach her? I forgot to teach her that when your true king comes, you can fall back. Because we're so used to, you know, we got the boxing gloves. You know, I was asking, you can take your gloves off. You can take your gloves off now, you know what I'm saying? We got the super cape, like, you
Yeah.
just need to pull it off from under the bed. And so now that true king, that true protector is like, ooh, like, I don't really know, because you so.
Yeah.
Because but you had to be that to
Right.
protect yourself, and now you gotta know how to fall back. So I'm like, we also need to teach our daughters, like, when he shows up, you can fall back. Look, we got him on guard 24/7, girl.
24/7, girl.
Girl, you better not let.
I
We
think
have your
I
own.
think that's just, but that's just that's also a complexity just in being a Black woman, right? As Black women, and this could be a whole nother podcast, but as Black women, we raise our Black daughters to, you know, be strong, because there's so many reasons why. We can go back to slavery and history and all of that.
Yeah.
But you are right. We don't teach them what happens when they come.
Yes, that's true.
And that's a huge generation of women that I feel that way about.
Yeah.
And how to just dial it back when they come. So yeah.
Because a lot of us haven't experienced them coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know.
And we don't have a point of reference.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Your
true.
generation changes that.
My daughters and the nieces, well, y'all don't have such great history. I'm just like,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, I grew up mostly around women. I've never seen a male-female relationship play out in front of me. So,
Also, the other thing too, I would say too, is like when you said the importance of having dads being present, I think also realizing that as a woman, I can never be a dad. I don't know what it's like to be a dad. I can't speak to being a dad. So there are things that you know, outside of, you know, if you're causing harm, right? We can definitely step in if that's the case. But there are things that, you know, sometimes with my husband and I, like, I do things this way with the baby. He does things this way.
Yep.
Neither way is wrong. And
Yeah,
actually, it's really good for her to experience two ways because she knows there's multiple ways to solve a problem.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, all of her needs are met. And so I often will say to myself, like, instead of saying to him, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, I've been very cautious to say, this is what works best for me. You can try this strategy out or
Yeah.
you don't have to, but like, this is what works best for me because I am aware that I cannot be a dad. There's no way I can do it.
Yes.
I don't know what it's like. I don't know how to speak like a dad. I don't know how to walk like a dad. I don't know how to talk like a dad. And I think as women, we need to honor that we don't know that role. So we can't fully say this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I say this is what works for me. You can try it. I do this in this order. You can try that. I think Old McDonald while changing diapers. You can try it. Like whatever works. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Coming from a single mother, I've heard from my son, well, you don't know how to be that. No, I don't. I don't have a clue. And I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to get you through life. That's about it. So that's really important to recognize that, yep, Father's Day, I may have been the only one that you know, but I don't have a clue about being a father.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to do the best I can to
Yeah.
raise you the best I can as a man or a woman, each one.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we have to be okay with saying that to our children.
Yeah.
So that they don't pick up on, well, you trying to be a father. No, I'm really not. But I can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really important. I like that. I like that. I have enjoyed this. I don't even know what to say. I mean, wow, it's just, it's so important. It is so important. And to see the different perspectives and to see the two different sides of the same coin and how it affected both of you, but the healing process. Like we have to talk about the healing process and being open to healing. That's where your victory comes.
Yeah.
That's where the growth comes in. You're like a tree or flower, you're able to blossom. You have to do the work, and that's where you gotta do the healing. You gotta allow yourself to be healed. So
absolutely. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I think this should be this is the tip of the iceberg on this conversation. I think it should definitely be something we revisit. Again, I thank you for participating, saying yes to this conversation.
Of course.
And we are going to, you have anything else?
I do not.
So we are going to give you back to your baby girl and your hubby, because I'm sure she's down there doing her thing. She just started walking, so it's been real fun.
And popping, sweetheart.
Yes. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Okay, don't get out yet. Hold on. Oh, there you go. I hit the wrong thing. All right, so you have enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yes.
So hold on 1 second.